1555 of the 6th Astral Era. Sultan of Ul'Dah, Sasabal ul-Sisibal, weds Nanasha ul-Nasha. The nation prospers under a new sovereign couple. In 1556 of the 6th Astral Era, the Sultan and Nanasha gives birth to Nanamo ul-Namo, securing the throne for the line of Ul. However, in 1561 of the 6th Astral Era, Sasabal and Nanasha perish in an accident while traveling. Some claim this to be true, others whisper of an assassination. Whatever the case may be, Ul'Dah's Sultan and Sultana are dead, leaving their only daughter behind, Nanamo ul-Namo, who is promptly crowned Sultana of Ul'Dah at the age of 5. 1570. Reports of Garlean airships intruding on Eorzean airspace starts coming in from commercial passenger vessels near the Eorzean border. Shortly after the first reports ticked in, the Garleans opened fire on civilian passenger ferries. All regular airship travel is suspended all over Eorzea, Ul'Dah included. Eorzea enters a cold war with Garlemald, one that would turn hot much sooner than anyone expected. Welcome back to this RoaR special on the evolution of Ul'Dah before and after the Calamity. In part 1, which I highly recommend you watch before this one, we looked at what we today know as the Steppes of Nald, and I completely brushed over a small area that was accessible in the Ul'Dah main storyline, Aralig's Burial Chamber. Since we're going to cover the full Ul'Dah storyline in Chronicles of a Realm, I won't go into too much detail about what led to this particular instance, but this little girl, who we'll see a lot of later, trust me, loses her father in a horrible accident during a festival in the streets of Ul'Dah. He is kept in the burial chamber to be interred, giving you access to this small upper section of the chamber. In the lower half, people who have donated a lot of money to Ul'Dah are put to rest, while the less generous are placed in the upper chamber. The chamber itself isn't very interesting. It's small, has a small staircase leading down to the lower chamber door, which of course contains nothing. I always found it curious that the coffins in the chamber are all large in size, like that of Rogadins, Elizans, and Hurs, but I think it all stems from Ul'Dah frugality. It's simply cheaper to use one-size-fits-all coffins than having them custom-made for each race. Now let's get back on track. As Ul'Dah grew in popularity and became the city-state to be in, problems started to pile up. The market wards next to the Aetheryte and the Quicksand, which housed the Adventurers Guild, the Task Board, the Leave Meets, the Linkshell Distributor, and the Hourglass Inn, started to buckle under the weight of the countless requests made by players attempting to access the many features they had to offer. The servers started to lag, and then fail completely. Something had to be done to alleviate this endless pressure. Their solution was to close the Hourglass Inn and move it to the Gold Court in the middle of Ul'Dah, with the clerk in the Quicksand referring to it as the back entrance. However, it's worth noting that this position is nowhere near the Hourglass. In fact, it's almost placed entirely opposite of where you'd expect the back door to be. To solve the stress issues around the market wards, another NPC was placed in the Gold Court, which would provide players with the same options as the original market ward's entrance. The original market wards did not close down, leaving players with 2 points of entry to the market wards and the Immortal Flames headquarters. The Gold Court itself serves as the giant roundabout of Ul'Dah, branching out into every cardinal direction of the city-state. To the west, you'd find the Colosseum. And let me rant just a tiny bit here, because in 1.0 this was by far the most frustrating and annoying place in Ul'Dah. Because of the Colosseum structure, the path was split in two, creating 2 viewing platforms above the arena. However, this also meant that the 2 paths were completely separate, meaning that you had to always remember that the path to the right would only lead outside and the path to the left would lead you to the Gladiators Guild. As a 1.0 gladiator, this was the bane of my existence. The Colosseum was built around the year 1100 of the 6th Astral Era and is a distinct part of Ul'Dah culture. It is here Raoban famously achieved his 1000th victory, earning him a spot in the Syndicate and amassing a great fortune, some of which he used to just purchase the whole Colosseum. Moving to the south from the Gold Court, I guess it's time to address Ul'Dah's lighting. If you were to compare any section of 1.0's Ul'Dah to A Realm Reborn, you'd find that Ul'Dah is way darker. I'm not entirely sure if this was intentional in 1.0 or if it was simply a fault of the engine. Wherever you went in 1.0 Ul'Dah, there was always this perpetual dark shroud around you at all times. In A Realm Reborn, they apparently replaced the old light bulbs with some much higher wattage, because the perpetual darkness is all gone. As we make our way to the Goldsmith and Miner's Guild, you'll probably notice some minor changes to this specific area. Aside from the better lighting, they've placed signs and lampposts around the place, and this endless hole has been filled with water in A Realm Reborn. Now, this entrance shows how 1.0 vastly differs from A Realm Reborn. 1.0 was not a very decorated place. A lot of the same assets were reused instead of creating new ones, and as a result, you'd end up with stuff like this. We know the Goldsmith's Guild is in that door because of the map and the sign, but other than that, this place has no personality, no welcoming sign of a thriving Goldsmith's Guild. In A Realm Reborn, more props were placed near the entrance to make the area pop and feel more alive. This is clearly the entrance to a bustling Goldsmith's Guild. This is just a door in a dark hallway. And walking inside throws you into the darkest chamber in the realm. Seriously, you can see the mammoth's palms shine in the darkness. Kinda spooky, actually. As we move towards the Miner's Guild, we have to walk through this dark tunnel, which again is much brighter in A Realm Reborn. I should probably stop mentioning that at this point, because literally everything is brighter in A Realm Reborn. It's Ul'Dah. Eventually in 1.0 you'd end up in front of this giant block. To the left, you'd have the path to Milvaneth's Sacrarium, and on the other side of the block, the tunnel would continue to end up in the Miner's Guild. It's all just kinda confusing and dark though. There's no signs, nothing. Well, I guess this thing hanging on the side here is supposed to be a sign, but good luck reading that in the darkness. In A Realm Reborn, this of course got a major facelift. Gone is that giant block, which I think maybe was used to like hide loading of the tunnel behind it. That's possible. There's now a light there and a planter. In 1.0, the corridor leading further down looked just like any old corridor in Ul'Dah, while in A Realm Reborn it resembles more of a mine, with wooden flooring, scaffoldings, and some walls even being made entirely out of wood. And of course, we can't forget about the mysterious gate leading nowhere in 1.0. This was changed in A Realm Reborn to be the entrance to the Goblet, but it's curious to see that they also changed the direction of the corridor leading down. Now in this initial area, before entering the Miner's Guild, you'd finally get some mining props here and there. Interestingly, the Miner's Guild was originally the headquarters of Amagina and Sons Mineral Concern. In A Realm Reborn, this was changed to be a fully independent guild, with the Mineral Concern as their most important customer. Also, there's this curious map that used to hang on the wall, which I can't seem to recognize as any dungeon in 1.0. The map is removed in A Realm Reborn, which is even stranger. It was also heavily implied that the guild housed an underground brothel. They even had a stage. The stage is still there in A Realm Reborn, but it's no longer in use. Leaving the Miner's Guild, we find ourselves at Milvaneth's Sacrarium. And here's a curious find. The fountain outside of the temple devoted to Nald reads, "Divinity is the color of gold," which is exactly what it says on the fountain outside of Azareth's ossuary, and Milvaneth's Sacrarium in A Realm Reborn. In A Realm Reborn, the Sacrarium is closed to the public due to damage inflicted by the Calamity, but in 1.0 the doors were open, containing the statue of Nald with his giant ewer. Other than that, the hall was more or less identical to the Arsoneth ossuary, bloom and all. The area leading into the Weaver's Guild looked dreary and dark in 1.0, which, of course, you'd expect at this point. What you might not have expected is that the Weaver's Guild was actually called Sunsilk Tapestries in 1.0, and today, as covered in Part 1, Sunsilk Tapestries is located on Emerald Avenue as a shop. And again, just like with the Miners Guild, the name has been dropped and moved from the guild in A Realm Reborn, with Sunsilk Tapestries being a prime customer for the Weavers Guild. Leaving the dark corridors of Ul'Dah's interior, we make our way to Pearl Lane. In 1.0, this area was unusually empty, spare for a few NPCs and crates. In A Realm Reborn, it's absolutely overrun with NPCs, junk, and crates. Pearl Lane is also seamlessly connected to the Adventurers Guild, whereas in A Realm Reborn you'll be transitioning from the steps of Thal to Null and thus have to pass a loading barrier. Walking down from Pearl Lane, we'd find ourselves in the Sapphire Avenue Exchange, just like today, but you'd also be directly facing the exit tunnel of Ul'Dah. In A Realm Reborn, of course, this gate is closed. Also, market boards, which 1.0 didn't have. We had the market wards, and that was a thing that people used, or tried to, anyway. So let's turn to the right here and look at the, in 1.0 there weren't that many stalls in the Sapphire Avenue Exchange, or rather, there were almost the same amount as in A Realm Reborn. In fact, there's 12 today, there was 8 back then, but they were much tighter together in one spot in the middle of the avenue, leaving the southern part of the avenue completely empty. Now let's talk about something else. Let's talk about music. Now we've listened to more or less all of the music Thanalan and Ul'Dah had to offer, but there is still one, more obscure one that exists. Final Fantasy XIV 1.0's complex leave system had a very specific type of faction leave quests that required adventurers to slay notorious monsters, known as Faction Notorious Monsters, FNM. Only 3 of these leave quests ever existed: Deadeyes, Tarb Usage, if that's even how you pronounce it, and Sanigo, which was Thanalan's faction NM. When initiating one of these leave quests, the theme Beneath Bloodied Banners would start to play. Moving on to the second floor, or third depending on how you define Ul'Dah's floors, we find the Hustings Strip. This small circular area is located near the very top of Ul'Dah's central structure. In 1.0, the area looked like most other places in Ul'Dah. There was no carpet on the floor, and the sculpture in the middle coming down into the gold court was more imposing and allowed a lot more light coming through because of Ul'Dah's inside being so goddamn dark. The entrance to the Royal Promenade also got a slight facelift in the form of a longer rug, because in 1.0 the rug for some reason didn't go all the way down to the Hustings Strip itself. Other than that, nothing much else has changed here. Up the stairs towards the Alchemist Guild, an intriguing retcon greets us. This staircase right here. It was inaccessible in 1.0, but the name on the map read the Oasis. This area was never opened in 1.0, and attempting to walk up the stairs would just lead to an invisible wall. It was speculated at the time that this was intended to be where the game's housing system would be placed. This explains the retcon, as the goblet is located outside of Ul'Dah instead of inside, so the square is left without the entrance, making it a pointless spot on the map today. A proper relic from the past, like you can see that it is pointless, you can see that there's just no reason for this room to be there because it doesn't branch out anywhere. It's just a square room with nothing going on in it. But now you know, it used to be something. It was planned to be important. The Scholar's Walk and the connected Alchemist Guild looked dark and spooky, as with most of Ul'Dah's interiors. If there's one word I can use to sum up this room, it's pillars. They were everywhere, massive pillars in the darkness. In A Realm Reborn, this place was opened up by removing a lot of the old massive pillars. Ironically, it almost makes the hall look smaller somehow. 1.0's Ul'Dah is in many ways the epitome of everything that was wrong about 1.0. It was poorly optimized for the amount of players it could hold, it was riddled with engine limitations, textures had bloom set so high you could go blind, and the interiors had too few light sources to properly light it up. Despite all the trouble, 1.0 players do feel a strong connection to the city-state they spent so much time in. Despite the lag, despite the blinding bloom, for many, it was their home in 14. Which is why so many gathered at the walls of Ul'Dah with their Gobu mounts to protect Ul'Dah. It was all for naught, of course, as it didn't prevent hundreds of rampant GM-spawned mobs from invading the city-state and wiping the streets with adventurers' bodies. It was pretty wild. And that's it for part 2 of this RoaR special look at 1.0's Ul'Dah. I hope you enjoyed this little deep dive into what the city-state was and what it became. If you feel like there's something I've skipped over or forgot, which is inevitable, please let me know in the comments below. If I get enough requests, I'll make a follow-up to this two-parter looking closer at specific comment-requested locations. Thank you all for watching, leave a like if you enjoyed this, and do subscribe if you want more. In the next special, we'll be looking closer at the proud city-state of the Black Shroud, Gridania. Until then, may you ever walk in the light of the crystal.